Teleresco, and my guest is the incredible Roderick Curtis. Roderick, how you doing, man?
Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate you, man. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
hey, we got it. We got to be, we got to build everybody up because why not, right? I mean,
Yes, sir. Yes,
that's
sir.
right. So, Andrew recommended me to you, and I was looking at your profile, and you do like comics and stuff, it seems. So, how did you get into the comics and the stuff?
Man, I've always been into the visual pursuits. Art. I was an artist and connoisseur of '90s cartoons.
Ooh,
GI Joe and Transformers, and in their heyday when back when they would let the TV raise you. We were
Dude, I'm 40. I was there. Although to be fair, the I think GI Joe and Transformers were like the late 80s more than the 90s.
yeah,
The
late
late
'80s,
80s, like more
early '90s.
90s.
Yeah, I was a
My
teenager from late '90s.
Yeah, so for me, like late 80s was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles all the way and DuckTales because that was my jam.
Man, so you know what it meant to just kind of be trapped in like this artistic storytelling that beyond actors, but just like cartoons and somebody's imaginative world.
Sometimes that's actually better because the thing is, right? We imagine like our big part of how we perceive things is our imagination. Even the people that say I have no imagination, bullshit. You do. It's just how you use it. So cartoons are like those cartoons, especially some of GI Joe and Transformers. Let's be real. They were advertisements for the cool fucking toys. That's what they were. That's what they
Hmm.
were. That's what
Yeah.
by and large they were, right? But when you get to like Ducktales or Gummy Bears or let me think of another really good one. I love Darkwing Duck guy. I love me some like I think I love me some Darkwing Duck. But the thing is, all that stuff used really, especially like DuckTales, used incredibly sophisticated storytelling, like old school,
Hmm.
right? A lot of the Uncle Scrooge comics from the 60s from Carl Barks were the basis for the DuckTales cartoons. That shit was good.
Well,
That shit was really good.
I think comics and that even even like the marketing is real like surface, but it's how strategic is it in its pursuit, right? To get you to go actually buy something, to be so involved in something. So it's not so much about it being like marketing, mass marketing, that it like devalues it, because it really captured a lot of young
Just
kids. You know what I mean? But I know what you mean about like how like isn't that like the height of success, right? To say we're gonna just create this thing so that you can go buy this, and there's this connection that
yeah.
just just
Well,
like you said, inspires
it
people.
it was easier in some ways back then too because you know I hate to do the back in my day crap because I mean everybody like goes through colored stained glass windows, but it was a more honest time, so it was easier to get invested in stuff, right? The more as we've gotten older slash wiser slash jaded slash whatever the fuck we are, um, it's harder to convince us because we've heard a zillion sales pitches. Back then, it was just, oh my god, this is awesome, and exciting, and fun. Let's go and do. And that was the thing about GI Joe and Transformers. I can't really tell you like a great all time story because they weren't quite my jam. But remember the energy they brought. Like again, it
Mm.
was fun, kinetic. We're the good guys. We're gonna save the day from the evil Cobra or the Decepticons. We're like we got Optimus Prime. We are the shit. Like we're the cool people and it allowed those imaginations to go this larger in life over the top imagination, which was very very cool. Culture changed in the 90s, right, from the late 80s to 90s, but that energy of the 80s, that's the cool thing about the 80s. The 80s in general had great energy. Looking back, I wonder, like in terms of storytelling, sometimes I wonder what we were thinking,
Well,
but in
I
terms
think
of
the
energy, I can't.
cartoons started being catered to our generation coming up as we
Yeah.
got older. Because I never, so that's where I started, and I never really left. So there was always something that I think was like cutting edge, that was kind of catered to our generation, that just started off in with those cartoons. And then I got into like Avatar and
That's a good
Naruto, and
one.
I think these cartoons are catered towards adults that are spending on the books and investing in the culture, so to speak.
Both. Good kid stuff actually is tailored to both a little bit. You want when you write a good kid story, you don't want to write just for kids for a couple of different reasons. Number one, kids are at different levels, even like at young ages, depending on environment, home life, things like that. People like kids are looking for escapes that are more tailored to where they're at. Sometimes you just want that energy because when we're kids, we're boys, we want that aggression. So yeah, GI Joe, Transformers was a thing, but as you get older, you're like, life's more than that. And like, okay, even like Dr. Seuss, as silly as Seuss was, dealt with some adult shit, right? There is something in there even for adults. So when you do stuff for younger audiences, it's always good to add older content in there because it forces not just the kids to grow. Like if you have kids, you're like, the most terrifying thing of all for me is my kid might like the same stuff I did as a kid, and I cringe at some of the stuff I liked as a
Well,
kid, but
you know,
right?
I think that's happening now, like, because even as I got older and on the cusp, as you start getting to those younger teenage years, and get exposed to something like The Simpsons, right? Where you're
Mhm.
like, this actually looks like it's for kids, but it's it's just super for adults, but it's so subtle that a kid could watch the whole show and not get, how deep The Simpsons is getting on you as far as like social commentary, funny
Well,
delivery, you know, and
The
real writing
Simpsons.
depth.
The Simpsons is an interesting study. Like the first year is the show's finding its voice. Every show has that like struggle the first year. But when you get to the second year until all the way to like the seventh or eighth year, some of the best that's like Simpsons, Nirvana, Roseanne. I mean, people don't remember Roseanne so much in the best of lights for obvious reasons, but in terms of the show, like those were the shows of that era that we were coming into the age of the American dream wasn't what we thought it was. Some of the problems there in the 60s are still here. Rodney King got beaten. Which goes back to stuff that was happening in the 60s. You have racial inequalities, you have social justice issues, the middle class is slowly being decimated, that retirement guarantee, that perfect home life, everybody's getting divorced. There was a bit of disillusionment, and there's a lot, especially in the early 90s, a lot of disillusionment, and the Simpsons reflected that so perfectly that it did it so, like I remember my high school, dude, we actually had an assignment: take the Simpsons, one Simpsons episode, and find all the negative connotations in The Simpsons, all of them. You got like the things you
Yeah,
take for
yeah.
granted, and like I like everything from the stereotypes of all the characters. And the episode, by the way, was when Homer and the entire town in Springfield became indoctrinated into a cult. That was remember that episode? Do you remember that one? Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
where Homer was like this invincible man because he was just so dumb he couldn't hear the programming, right? He just couldn't be programmed, whereas everybody else had been broken but him. But it was one of those things where you know you see it, you watch it, you go, holy crap! But it's such a sophisticated show, especially for the first 7-8 years. After that, as the years have progressed, I can't watch The Simpsons anymore.
You
It's
know,
it's
I
terrible.
can go back and watch my favorite episodes, but that I think your show is like super unique in that we've just, you start off kind of asking me how I got into comics, and we've really kind of done this like
Yeah,
generational commentary
yeah.
on kind of and leading like to when the age where you can even like laugh at a Simpsons joke. I'm at that age where I'm then exposed to like Akira,
Hmm.
and kind of launched into like this whole other like fantasy world of storytelling through like Japanese anime, and kind of a resurgence back into like just comic. But I think that was at the time where comics was falling. So like I was not like I only was really like into comics at a real kind of brief time, and then I was into like the X-Men cartoon and like Akira, and like starting to grow up, but still like loving these what you thought it would be like and took that's what I'm talking about, like adult versus child storytelling. Because here I am, grown, and I still love these. Netflix is kind of having a resurgence, but having these adult driven animations.
There's, like I said, animation is a beautiful art form. And again, because there's always a product of imagination to it. There's a product of unreality to it, and we fill in the gaps. Like good storytelling has interaction in it. Now, to the degree of interaction, it's kind of limited when you're looking at television, but there's still some of it there. Still, these are your. When you watch a show, when you read a book, when you expose yourself to some kind of media or culture, it becomes yours to some degree. It's not just the creatives, it's also yours because it's a two-part process, the person that creates it and the person that savors it and interacts with it, right? And you create a different and both of you come away with a different product. There are things I would get as a reader for your book that you might not have intended as a writer, but here you are and you've done it, you know what I mean? And
I mean, so yeah, I mean, that was kind of my evolution into wanting to do comics, but it was always beyond comics. So as you kind of look at my profile and you see what Royal House Comics does, you see that we are advertising like 2D animation, and we're developing a game for Dambe.
yeah.
I grew up loving like Street Fighter, and then I went to go see the terrible movie or like be interested in whatever like content. If they had a comic, I think I remember like buying a few
The Malibu
Street Fighter
comic.
comics.
No, it was Malibu. They did the Street Fighter comic. It was interesting. I never thought of Chun-Li and Ryu. Again, I was young as dumb as a teenager. Like I didn't think Ryu and Chun-Li were romantic until I read that book. But then it's like, oh, that actually kind of makes
You
sense
see a little
there.
backstory, and even start to be more interested in the game, and they start bringing in the characters' teachers as comic, as characters, and
Oh yeah.
developing whatever backstory it was
The
for that.
the Udon comic was really good. They were very true to the classic design, and they told a really cool full story. Like they told Ryu's story really well,
Hmm.
start to finish, from him to going to the temptations of the dark side and to kind of mastering. The idea of self mastery was very much what Ryu is about, and it was and
I,
they did a
I
good
think they
job
were
with that.
real early in like this whole idea of like a cut scene too,
Yeah,
with the Street Fighter, as you started like getting 3 and 4 and you know playing these story modes, because it was such cutting edge like on a game side, that now you take these cutscenes for granted, and like uh, games like Naruto are like taking these cutscenes to like fill in canon or filler, or
oh yeah,
other character backstories, where like Street Fighter in our generation was kind of like the pioneer in that.
yeah.
Metroid.
Well, Metroid's a great game. Metroid's an amazing world where like of all the Nintendo games in terms of really interesting worlds, I think that one's got some huge bank to it. You have a badass female protagonist. Like she was a badass well before almost anything out there. I mean, she's almost like the prototype. Like Ridley from Aliens is her prototype, basically. She's basically the next variation of that. And interesting world, got a suit of armor, got this really crazy world you got to explore. It's like an like it's a cool concept. I think Metroid is amazing. Street Fighter, once upon a time, dude, I was really good at that game.
Mhm.
Really, really good. I was at a championship level. I used to spar with the Caribbean champion in Windsor, Ontario for fun on Street Fighter Alpha 3. I lost more than I won, but I held my
Mhm.
own. It wasn't like he walked on me either. So
Yeah, I used to love that game, man.
yeah,
So like,
it was a
as I
territory.
as I jumped into comics, like I always thought of like this 360 degrees that you can interact with these ideas. So we're developing a mobile Dambe game. If you've looked at our content and seen Dambe, and Pharaoh versus Priest has an anime. It started off as an animation project when I was in college. It was a 3 minute short anim stop motion animation for what would eventually be my first comic book, Pharaoh versus Priest, which is out now. That was the comic we had featured at Comic Con, and it took me 15 years to write it, but uh, the epicenter of that idea was born from a student project in 2005 at Pitzer College.
So did you do animation first? Was your goal to be an animator at one point?
You know, Man, I think I wear the jack of many trades hats, like kind
Sure.
of with a badge of honor. So I'm a football coach, a teacher, and I make comics and content. So you know, in 2005, it just started off as like a student project. I wanted to jump like right into like creating the movie. Like I didn't just like do like an art project. I'm like, man, who wants to like join up on a team and do
Yeah.
like an art project? Like really like bringing it like on a multimedia level. So I drew the characters in like profile, side, arms. So like I was able to like put together these pretty intricate fight scenes, and actually for what was 2005 on like a stop motion camera, I thought was ridiculous. But I there was an expertise that went beyond what I can do. So I had computer render, or a computer guy come in and could take that and add a background. I had some animation people, some sound friends, friends that were into like sound and that part of media, and we came together like a 8-person
Mhm.
team and put together like a 3-minute like video with sound, motion,
Yeah,
fighting, and everything.
it takes a lot of work to do animation well. Like I just did a commercial project. 3 seconds of animation, just 3 seconds took hours. There's two of us, but still, it took hours. It was
Hmm.
like I had a whole new respect for animators after doing that. It's like, holy crap, is that hard?
But what, I'll tell you that not only was it a practice in that, but it was my first practice in like managing a team
Hmm.
and bringing something that was no more than like just an idea, like just some crazy idea and some characters to actually like have somebody else walk into a theater and see 3 minutes
Hmm.
of something that took you countless hours to put together, but just experience the final product and clap or say that was cool or say, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
eventually, buy it or purchase it or develop actual market for it.
It's a cool experience because one, it's all on you. Like you get this like moment of holy shit, like what am I doing? Because you've never done anything like it before, and then you get to work with people who really, really know what they're doing, or at least have an idea what they're doing, and they bring their own ideas to the table, and it's an incredible experience. And if you're good at it, they want to work with you again, which is amazing, right? So all of that to say that how do I put this? Oh, so delicately. It's like it's an experience putting a project and finishing it. And that's an amazing thing. Then you're like, oh my gosh, people want to buy this shit. This is so cool. And then
Hmm.
you're in another stratosphere. It's like, wait, how can I do this again? And
Yeah,
and
that
and
that's definitely where we're at. So fast forward 15 years later, I write Pharaoh versus Priest. I actually write it. I get out of my head and I write the dang thing. And I started off publishing it as a novel first, which is still in the queue. But I also wanted to make it visual because, like I said, I always wanted to be a movie or some way to be seen. But I knew writing it was important in its novel form, in its full full arc in a storytelling format. So I wrote it, started publishing it, and then I simultaneously started making the comic. And the
Mhm.
comic finished, um, and it was spectacular. I met this Ukrainian artist, digital artist that just made it from, like I said, just with same experience with the movie as a student. As you start bringing in other experts and other people that are talented, it just takes it way beyond even what you thought it was. I knew what I thought my character looked like in my mind, but it was always fuzzy. But when I actually got with an artist who crystallized it, and I'm like, oh, that's our character, then the whole thing like really became real.
Yeah. No, it does. And it's better than what you imagined it to be. So I'm gonna ask a very interesting question here. Why 15 years? What happened? Why did it take 15 years to get there?
Well, I think as you go into like that college mode, and you start preparing for the nitty gritty of life, like those those things work almost opposite to the creative pursuits in many ways. how long can you be a struggling? You don't plan on being a struggling artist, so if you don't get like that nice path towards being a professional artist, then you find yourself trying to figure out how to make ends meet or how to get a solid job and career. And sometimes that's and don't talk about earning a family and and working at a relationship, and partnership. So
Mm-hmm.
you know finding hours in a day, as a young person, if you're not like super invested in the ups and downs of being an artist, you find yourself doing other things,
Mm-hmm.
and you might even be gravitate towards other things, well, in a way that you might be able to make a lot of money being a salesman and sustain a family and do have a really
Oh,
cool experience in life, but can you also find the time to and the inspiration to like make incredible art as well?
I have a couple thoughts. I don't know you very well, but I'm going to make a guess. You might not like me for making this guess, right? Because I realize this when we all go, hey, I want to be an artist. Okay. I'm going to be this, 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 and this. When you're young, you have no fucking clue how to get there. And it's terrifying because you don't know. You're like, do I go reach out to people? Do I just do my thing and hope someone discovers me? Do I what the fuck? Right? You don't know. You really don't. And it's hard because again, I mean I've been freelancing now again steadily for 6 months. It took me I'm four again, I make four figures I'm not out of living yet with this. This is an up and a down. But again, this is a decision I've made. I'm like, I'm going to make this work. So I'm willing to go through the ups and downs and days where there is no money, days where there's a ton of money, weeks where I get like 5 checks at once, and then like a month where I get nothing. Because that's part of the lifestyle. But you gotta be willing to do that. And that's hard. That's really, really, really hard. When you're young, it's scary. It's really, really scary. It's easier. And when I'm going to preface this by saying this too, it's also about priorities too. When you're younger, you're like, I got to get my shit together and then I'll go do this. But what happens with a lot of people is they get their shit together and then they don't because they lose their passion or their focus or their awareness. So I'm going to guess for you, my friend, at least for a while that was the case. You might have still had the thought in the back of your head, but you're like, I'm going to get my shit together. I'm going to do all the right things I'm supposed to do. And then somewhere along the way, you did all the right things you were supposed to do. And you went, well, now what? Fuck.
Hmm.
What am I supposed to do now? I did all the right things and I'm not unhappy per se, but I'm not exactly like, pleased about this. This isn't what I thought this was.
But for any like writer, artist who and now I really claim that title as a writer and a creator. But before you have the audacity to call yourself a professional, whether that be freelance, because if you do something well enough where somebody will buy it, pay for your professional, there might be levels, right? I coach
Oh yeah.
football. I get paid for it at the high school level. I'm a professional coach, even though I'm not at the professional level of football, right? I get paid to coach.
High school. Okay, high school football in the United States is very. It's in my opinion, actually, it's more professional than it probably should be in some ways because there's way too much money involved
Yeah,
in it in the
yeah.
United States, especially. I'm not saying even on your end. Actually, you guys are underpaid, but the whole like
I
system.
mean, but you get to a certain, level of high school football, and you're talking about people making a living, $60,000, $100,000 to just coach high school football in
Yeah,
Texas or South Carolina or some,
because yeah,
schools in
because
Los
those
Angeles.
those are places that breed players, and there's a business model to it. So that's the thing about But there's also equally, there are high school programs in the country that pay $5,000 to coach football,
Mhm.
which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
dick all, which is dick. But it's one of those things where, again, there's a business model to it. And I honestly think it's a bit, students, in my opinion, aren't as educated about the business of that
Well,
as they should be.
artists are not, and leading us back to
Or
why
no,
it
no,
took
no. We'll
me.
get to that. We'll get to that. I
Yeah,
know this very
yeah.
well. Yeah. But just going to you, just again, we'll get off this because I realize I might be stepping on some stuff here too. I would go so far as to say that like you are a professional, like by the definition, you've been a professional. It might not have been quite what you imagined it to be, but you got there, and that's really all that matters at the end of the day.
Mhm. And you know what? Like, for if you went out for if you play football and that was your thing, and you spent an hour and a half with me, and I charged you anywhere from $20 to $50, you'd be a better player at the end of that hour and a half. You'd get the value of what you're,
Mhm,
closer to your dream or closer to your goal, by the end of that hour and a half, because I'm sharing an experience from experience.
mhm.
I played college football. um I've like you said, that audacity of saying you're a professional, because there was times where I coach and maybe I wouldn't charge you anything. Hey man, let's just go out and I'll
Yeah,
help you,
that's
right?
exactly
Or
again.
I'll just, let me draw
That's the
something for you, let me write something
that's
for you.
that's the business of freelancing right there, and we'll get to there. I think we're going to get there, but what I, it's not the audacity of being a professional. It takes confidence to say that your skills have value. Artists and athletes in the United States, athletes have a shot of seeing that value. Depending on the sport, some sports it's much harder. Like football is a super competitive field. Like some of the, like everybody makes fun of it because in some ways because it seems simple, but the footwork, the discipline, the conditioning, the strength, the power. The fact is you're trying to push or tackle or knock a man down against his will.
Mhm.
That's just as strong, as fierce as you. It takes, there's a skill set, there's techniques, there's a lot of little nuances to it. And it's so competitive that the very top levels of the game, you can make a fortune at it. But to get there, high school in football is like, okay, so in the United States, there are tons of, like a lot of high school athletes anywhere else in the world would be world class, right? Anywhere else in the world. But of that, maybe a third of them get to college, maybe a third.
Mhm.
And assuming you don't get injured, assuming, right, you don't go because your body's going to go through abuse for the, I mean, that's just how it works. Your body just goes through that process. Then in college, maybe a third or maybe it's probably closer to a sixth or an eighth of those
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
are eligible for the NFL draft. And then your career is an average of maybe 5 years, right? Which is still an incredible ride. Like that's an incredible ride if you get to go through that. But you got 5 years on
Mhm.
average, unless you're Tom Brady or you're Pat Mahomes, right? Some of these like once in a lifetime talents and minds for the game. And in that case, you're looking at you might have a longer career. Tom Brady is like can literally not work another day in his life, and he did it
Mhm.
playing football. But that's such, I mean, to Tom's credit, that's a lot of dedication, practice, procedure, a lot of like dedication to the game itself, but also a little bit of luck too. Because again, one right
Mhm.
hit, one wrong shot at the wrong,
Oh
you're
yeah,
done. You're
yeah.
done.
I I will never forget it. And it might have went over many other players at that time. I was a football player at a camp in at USC, and the presenter said something that I think went over many of the players' heads, and it stuck in mind. He said, "If you make your pension in the NFL, you take about 10 years off your life." And
Yeah.
I thought that was a crazy way, one, to recruit people to to come
No,
play
he was
for
being
you,
real.
but yeah,
He's
like
being
just the
real. Like,
realness and like he was telling you to think about other things besides football.
well, not even just that. Just note that this is tough. Like, like one only like anything else in life, it's about dedication. Are you dedicated? If you have the talent to get this far, then when it really comes down, what it really comes down to, do you have the willpower to pay the prices you're gonna have to pay to go to the next level, whatever that is, right? Now, again, college players. I mean, if you get to the college level, which you did, they'll often give you scholarships for it, which is great. It gives you opportunities to do other things, right? But like I said, you teach, which probably came from your football scholarship. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's a hell of a consolation prize, right? All things considered. And the fact is, again, only a handful of players even get to the college level, let alone the pros, right? So it's a super competitive sport, and especially in the United States, it's super competitive. And if it had been any other sport, any other part of the world, a lot of more athletes would make it. It's tough.
It is. It's
Right.
hard, and I think this is a reason why, one, I made a decision on how far I would be willing to take my football career at that. I played Division 3 football. Um, so I, from that time, I knew that I was going to balance other things, besides just the academics, but like, you know, continue to stay interested in the cartoons. And I was a nerdy football. I was a good football player, but I
Oh,
was
that
also
dude.
like I was also the nerd that would like go to like history day and win the chess tournament and
That's
also be
good.
the homecoming king. And like, so I really did a conscious effort to continue to like just explore,
Mhm.
who I was as a person, but like an artist, and tagged on that art minor, even though I also wanted to make responsible decisions and was a psychology major. Found room to do an art project that
Mhm.
wasn't necessary for my, where I thought I was going in life. But I always wanted to tell a story, like, and that's why it took me 15 years, because the story like had to come out. Nobody is ever going to tell this story if I don't. And it took me 15 years to realize that.
Mhm. Ah, so I'm gonna ask a hard question. Were you scared?
I yeah, oh yes. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I had never written a book. The most I've written was a 5 to 10 page paper.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of research, and I was just listening to YouTubers who were, professional authors that gave you an insight to their process of writing and self-publishing and writing multiple and gaining honors and being established, right? But they started off as just a regular person, and I started to demystify this this creator persona of the director and the writer and the artist that you see at the highest level being better than you in more ways that you like feel like you can overcome, or like you can never do that. And I really started to feel like I can do that, as I started listening and learning and practicing myself. So, and then I wrote a chapter, and I figured if I just lay it out, I can do this. Read a 120-page book. So I just mechanicalized it.
Mhm. You there, bud?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. You faded for just a second there.
Well, yeah, like I got into the practice and mechanicalized it, and leveraged some motivation to just like pump it out, and wrote
Oh yeah.
a 120-page book.
So an athlete and an artist are almost alike in every way. Almost. There's some differences, yes, but really when it comes to discipline, dedication, showing up, the exercises to accomplish a task, there's no difference. It's the same thing. Show up and do the work, whatever that work is. Art has this tendency to be very mystical in the sense that people have this idea that, oh, I'm submitting to a publisher. Oh my gosh. Oh, and you should be excited about this stuff. I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but there's a line between excitement and, oh my God, this is a pedestal. You don't want to pedestal football. You don't want to pedestal the NFL. No matter what your obstacle is in life, whatever you choose to do, you can go for the Golden Globes, you can go for the Grammy, you can go for the Super Bowl, you can go for to be, a Pulitzer-winning author, right, or a journalist. You can be a Hugo Award-winning author. You can win the Eisners for comics. All of these things are attainable goals. The trick is to treat them like attainable.
Excuse me.
No worries, that's Train.
Great.
I got it. Hi, Train. Hi, Train.
Yeah.
But no, but that's it, right? That's like artists have this real problem when you look at like publishing, that it's this it's not. It's just a goal to achieve. And if you have that in your head, you can be very level-headed about it and not work. And I've had this talk with a couple of like some major publishing professionals, and then same thing, like it's a business. And like all businesses, there are ways in, there are ways out. There's various ways, publishing, especially today, there's just so many different ways of doing it. And you can be successful at all of them. It's just understanding your goals, understanding who you are as a creative. And that's huge. If you understand that, you can actually achieve a lot of cool things, but you have to be willing to pursue those things.
Yeah. And I sat in a car before I wrote the first word after having the idea for 15 years. I knew all these characters in and out. I knew how the story ends, begins. I knew every fight scene. And
You were ready.
I was so ready. And I had already started kind of watching like how to write a book, or, those, started down that avenue, that rabbit hole. And I'm sitting in the car and I'm thinking like how unique this whole process was, and like how if I didn't write this story, nobody would ever read this story. It wouldn't exist. And like my kids would not see this part of me. They wouldn't be able to experience this side of me, like beyond just like the person that like takes them places and does things. Like nobody would really see like this serious side beyond the football player. However, somebody in the way you interact with them, whether that's a coworker. Oh, my coworker makes comics, or hey, my football coach makes comics, or my son makes comics, right? People see you one way, but like that comic or that idea that you create, like that's like universally you.
Yeah.
And nobody would have been exposed to that if I didn't write it or create it.
Exactly. Like we have this tendency in society to destroy our inner child. We have this tendency that's like, this is how we're supposed to be. And in all kinds of actions, there's these expectations. Truth of the matter is, we are far more than the boxes that people put us in, right? The question is, do we have the courage to go out and see exactly who we are in those uncomfortable spaces? I'm going to make a bet with you, my friend. I'm going to make a bet. My bet was when you first did the blank page for a little bit, probably scared you just a touch, even though you were ready to tell that story. Because that thought was, what if it's bad, right? What if it's terrible? And then eventually you have to get to the other side, because I had to do the same thing with, like, I draw now a little bit now too, right? I do some drawings here and there. And the thing I realized is I can't be afraid of it being bad. I can't be afraid to show the world how bad it is. If I'm not afraid of that, what can stop me? Honestly. Right?
That courage is developed, it's practiced, and once you kind of get over it, you kind of seek that thrill, because it is a thrill.
God,
And
yeah.
even that part 2 is a thrill, because you kind of have that same energy. Like, is it even as good as the first one I was able to write? But as the first one, you kind of have to. I didn't edit while I was writing, so I just flushed. I just like took that approach and just like had a kind of a plan completely, like with the book, but then like even by chapter, and then I just like flushed, tried to like get into like a little zone. And the editing process was a whole nother, because a lot of stuff I thought was good just got completely cut by the by the editing
Yeah, yeah,
process.
totally. Yeah, no, but
You
that's
know, but
the
I think I found the narrative I was looking for, right?
yeah. But that's the process too, right? Like we all have this like concept that what we think but that's the hard thing. Like get the idea down. Once the idea is down, you can do whatever you want with it. But the idea is there, it's concrete, it's tangible, you can feel it, and that's wonderful. Now you can play with it so many different ways.
But the feeling, but I think that's such an apropos word for what I'm trying to express, that jump was from, having a blank page, um, to saying, from before that moment, knowing that I had an intention of publishing, being an amateur, being a complete amateur, and jumping onto that page as a professional, and being okay with the process wherever that took me, to be a profession, and the detail it was going to take to get this right. Um, so it's kind of akin to like a bird that knows is instinctually supposed to fly, that jumps off the cliff for the first time and
Mhm.
realizes that you can, but if you would never if you never took that leap. So as I started getting onto the page, it just got so fun and thrilling, and I let people actually read it while I was writing it, and they were like
Yeah.
hanging on, like wanting you to finish. Hey, what's happening next chapter? Are you gonna finish it? Finish that? Are you gonna work on it today? And that kind of kept me motivated too.
Oh,
So it was really
sure.
fun.
It's great. It's you got instant feedback, and it's awesome. Like one of the hardest things is when you do a novel or anything like that is you have no idea if people are going to read your work. You hope so. I've been really like the last month has been kind of a blessing for me because I've released my last book on the 1st of December, and I've been hearing like quietly, even if there's just quiet, just some nice words about the story, which that's really cool. I've gotten some nice reviews. It's like, okay, people read, people give a shit. That's awesome, right? It motivates you. Even again, it doesn't need to be a big crowd. It just has to be your crowd, and that's the allure. That's the appeal of it. You know what I mean? There's an appeal to that, but also, I mean, you get over your fear. The only way fear very often is a lot of people see fear as a cage. I see fear as a door. The thing you really want in life is very often through the things you are fearful of or discomforted with. If you fear dying, then you got to go face that fear of death. If you fear getting sick, then you have to face that sickness. If you fear success, then you got to go chase that success. If you feel failure, you got to chase that failure because it's the only way you're going to see what's on the other side. Take the unknown and make it known. Even though the fear might still be there somewhat, it will be a different fear when it's done. Um, so a football analogy. One of my favorite football defenses of all time was the Seattle Seahawks defense, Legion of Boom, way back not too long ago. That
Hmm.
was one of their whole philosophies. The thing you're terrified of, we're gonna put you in front of it. Because when we put you in front of it, we're gonna have you face that unknown dragon and kind of just like own that dragon. It might still not be your thing, but you're not going to be afraid of it anymore. Or you're not going to have the same fear of it anymore. You're just going to do what you're supposed to do. And that's how I see like fear.
Well,
You
I
got the
get that analogy, and it's funny how like close of proximity. USC was. I went to their camp as a high schooler. I'm a Pete Carroll coach in the
yeah.
model and the mold. My first job was in sales out of college at Velocity Sports Performance, and this sports psychologist Mike Gervais, was like modeling his doctrine, his philosophy, his practice, and he actually works with Pete Carroll, and as like, and they always talk about transformative. So like, as I got into writing comics, it really became a transformative experience,
Mhm.
and as I built my team, I treated them the way Pete Carroll treats that defense, and the way the way I approach like my own like self actualization. I try to provide this to other creators and artists and writers that work with me, to like, not everybody's doing my project Forever versus Priest. Like, I want you to bring your project to life, and how can I help you do that, right? I want to expose my publishing platform and be able to take submissions for somebody that just needs a way to bring their project to life.
You're going to have a very interesting role in the years to come because in your challenge as a publisher, okay, a guy like me, got my own platform, got lots of listeners. Like I got lots of, not so many people watching, but I do have a lot of listeners. And I asked the question, like, because I have a platform, I have a fan base, I've built a following. What can you offer me that I don't already have or cannot get on my own? As a publisher, that is going to be your biggest challenge for the next 5 years because technology has changed. A
Hmm.
guy like me, there might be situations where I want a publisher, but you're going to have to answer that question for me in order
I
for me
think
to
it.
work
I
with.
think that question is answered at many levels, from the,
Absolutely. But
the amateur writer and artist who can't find a team, can't find somebody to foster talent on just an individual basis, to say, not only do I need help publishing, but like, am I a professional artist? Do I meet a standard of writing that, am I ready? And some of them aren't, and
oh
some
yeah,
of them,
oh
don't
sure.
need to be necessarily like rejected. So just like, no, no, you're not, but like you have a spark, and that's where my coaching comes in. So I
Mm.
have a lot of young people on my team that maybe are better now as artists, as creators, as business people in their own rights, by having worked with us. So that's an individual growth that you benefit, that you get from like a publisher, like ourselves. The other is the seasoned creator that maybe hasn't broke out yet.
Hmm.
And there are many of these in the indie space, and maybe even did some work with bigger companies or higher commissions, and hasn't figured out a business acumen to popularize their talent, or sustain it in a way where they can get away from just like the nitty gritty of just sustaining living life, like why it delayed me 15 years from really jumping into this space. I think seasoned creators can sometimes get disenfranchised and like go back and kind of put their talents back on the shelf too, after
Oh,
having
it can
been
happen.
exposed.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it can happen. It's a struggle. It's a never-ending struggle. You have to be vigilant. You have to like when I'm done this interview, I'm going to be doing some pitches. Then I'm going to be finishing my contracted work for the remainder of the year. Maybe get myself another gig before the year is up. Maybe not. I don't know. I would love it, but we'll see, right? But if not, I got gigs. I got gigs lined up in January, right? So I just go through an uncomfortable little bit of an uncomfortable holiday. That all said, right? That's the lifestyle I've chosen: to go up, to go down, to go left, to go right. And I realize it's easy to quit because it's so unpredictable. But again, but for my end, it's like what I got to remember is good things will keep happening as long as you put yourself out there. As long as you do the work, whatever that work is for you, good things will keep happening, right? And what they look like sometimes is a variable, and it's recognizing those opportunities too. That's kind of difficult as well. It's like I'm a writer, but I can do video, I do audio, right. I can draw somewhat, so I can design all kinds of different presentations. So if I looked at it strictly from linear, I just want to write. Okay, what am I writing? What's my specialty? What's my niche? What's my goal? But when I'm looking at it, it's like, well, I just want to tell as many like stories, help others advertise, which is what I'm quietly doing. It's just like, hey, I'll help you advertise your books, I'll help you advertise your product because I know how to do those presentations, right? That's the thing, right? I've made those decisions. Seasoned creators have to always realize too, like also the game constantly changes. You have to keep developing tool sets each and every time because it's like, how can I keep myself in the game? Well, if I can do more things, there's chances I'm going to find more work in different those things too, right?
I also think in the you talk about like value, like you give value,
Hmm.
right? You give value, in exchange for values. Any interaction is an
Hmm.
exchange, right? Um, some people know their value. Some people can leverage that same value very efficiently and
Hmm.
effectively. in maybe ways that somebody else would squander,
Yes.
outside of a plan, and how that fits in the whole structure of what you're doing, right? So I see this a lot with like fan, and I don't know if your thoughts on like fan art, but when going back to how like artists not breaking out, I think you can only get so big doing fan art, somebody else's IP, right?
Mhm.
Like as an artist, right? You can only gain so much exposure,
It it
doing
goes
stuff.
well, okay, so it depends on what your goals are. This
Hmm.
is what it ultimately comes down to. Like I said, there's many different ways to publish. For example, there are people that are great with fan art that would be amazing cover artists. Have they thought of that? Maybe, maybe not, right? Then there's like maybe people that want to do established properties. Nothing wrong with that, right? You probably need an IP of your own to get there, but it's not unheard of for someone to be so good that they'll give you a shot, right? I'm working with somebody next year that I think is good enough to get that shot if they ever want to pursue it, right? But what that comes down to is, does whatever kind of artist you are, what serves you, right? I mentioned the publisher thing to me. Right this minute, it doesn't. That doesn't mean that won't change. There are situations I could definitely see it. But right this minute, it doesn't, because my goals with my IP go far beyond what most publishers are willing to offer. I have different ideas of how to achieve that, and I want to try some of those ideas on my own. Now, will I succeed? I have no idea. But that's not really the point. The point is I want to understand the business I'm getting into more. Art is two parts. Even athletics is two parts. There is the craft of what you do, and then there's the business of what you do, right? And very few artists understand that takes both. You can be great at the craft. You can be so great. Very few artists are so absolutely great that they can't be ignored. There's are a handful of people that great. It's not many. There are a lot of art. Again, you don't have to be a great writer and can be very business savvy. 50 Shades of Grey isn't probably one of the best examples of that, right? To her credit, not taking away, but in terms of writing quality compared to some of the stuff I read, not even close. Didn't have to be. She found her audience and knew exactly where to go to get it. Kudos. Most of us are somewhere in the middle of that. We are good enough at telling our craft, and we have some degree of business sense on how to leverage it. And everybody, that's a different lever. But understanding that, but for most to understand that, they have to be aware that both levers exist.
Hmm. Yeah, and I I often I often use our an analogy of music when I'm talking about what we did and kind of my approach to the business and creative side of writing comic books. Um, always after I started writing my own, I always knew that I'd have more ideas. I'd want to follow up, and you know, there's only so many books the artists I work with can write. So draw. So I'm gonna have
Mhm.
to expand our bandwidth a little bit. So this constant exchange of value, right? Can I does this artist benefit from coming to work with me, the writer, right? And maybe I can't make them a better artist, but I do have that business side where they haven't thought of it in that way. They haven't figured out a way past this obstacle where our interaction will help us both make a creation or get build a brand and talk about like why somebody would need a publisher. That stuff is hard. It took us 10 months to build
Oh
a
yeah,
brand with Royal House and to even say that we have a publishing credit and I'm accredited
yeah,
author. Like most people, many people, I'd say most people that have a good idea probably don't have the stick to itiveness to actually get the publishing credit and sell a book. So to have somebody that has the experience to guide, that's why people will go sit in a seminar and
mhm,
listen to Tony Robbins, for a weekend and a several people will come out of there and completely change their life. Whereas the good majority maybe will just, have, a good experience and feel good about, a little recharge. They'll
Yeah,
take it so many ways. Some people will get the true value, of that. And Tony Robbins is making, a living attempting to get this message across. Right. So, and just the people that find themselves in those like self-help pursuits, it all started from, it always starts from a real like raw, genuine, and,
sure.
genuine pursuit.
Well, every artistic endeavor is from a genuine place. It's understanding what those genuine places are. Lots to unpack here. We'll touch on Tony Robbins at the end of this. We'll talk about artists and collaborators. I have currently 3 properties in development. One's ongoing. Two of them are ongoing. A third one's going to be coming out, and I'm doing kind of a little experiment for one that I'm writing and drawing, just because I want to. Just I don't know if it's going to be good, but I'm just putting out what I feel is the right story. So here's the thing. I look at artists, illustrators very different. I look at them as they have their own vision that adds to the story I'm telling. So does every artist I work with have the same vision for the same stories I'm telling? The answer is no. There are stories I would write that I should not draw. I don't have that in me, right? For that particular story, it's not what I do. As someone that illustrates, right? I have my Alice in Wonderland Greek mythology. I cannot imagine anyone but Kenzie Carr doing that book. I shouldn't touch it, right? She's who I imagine it to be. And she's fulfilled like more than exceeded expectations. My next project that I'm gonna be working on is mine, but the one after that, I know the one after that, and I cannot envision anyone else but her doing it because that's her strength. This is what she wants to do, and we've already talked about it. Kind of some ideas of where we kind of want to go and do with it. I couldn't get that with Kenzie, not because Kenzie isn't an incapable artist. It's just she has a different vision, and so does the artist I have. Right, for this book, they have different visions and they have different wants and they have different things that serve them. And so I'm approaching each story as to how does this serve the kind of thing you want to tell, right? And that's different for each of them, right? So I that's how I look at it. And then the other part of it too, is now let's go to Tony Robbins. So because Tony Robbins is so he's an interesting one in the sense that some of his stuff's really good. I think some of his stuff's shit. That's just my opinion. But I also really I think the big message from any self-help, whatever you choose to use, 'cause there's some great self-help stuff out there, and there really is. And it's great to have self-affirmations. It's great to be positive. It's great to put yourself in the mindset to make things happen. It's great. Doesn't always there's a time and place where it isn't always necessary. I think everybody goes their ups and downs in life and they need to learn shit too. But I also think too is what serves you is the biggest question. And it's for Tony Robbins. Some people are ready for a full transformative change, complete, total renewal, restart. And I think a guy like Tony Robbins, those people are who they serve best. Then there's some people who want little changes, not the complete change, but just want some little changes in perspective. And they get their own thing out of that. There are some people that just like spending money. Shrug. Right? That's all you can do, right? Shrug. Right? And then there are some people who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. Right? And those are generally the 4 audiences he serves. Complete transformation is probably what he lives for. The second one, he can live with. The third one, he grudgingly accepts. What are you going to do? And the fourth one, same thing. What are you going to do? Right?
Well, I think like anybody under the microscope, any of the like the gurus, under a microscope, like we all like have the range of of like who we are and how well we live up to to what we say we are, right? So like I think he lives for the people that he's transforming. He the people that want little changes he probably wishes he can get through to them and make that big jump. I think that's where we mostly like think we are as people and as creators. Like I think I'm really good. I think if you see this with the way, if you see my creation the way that I saw it, you're gonna like be transformative. This is gonna like you're gonna love
Mhm.
this, right? There's other people that give you that feedback and like, oh, the art is really good, or on this level, like I really appreciated it. And then you have the people that didn't, for whatever reason, it just wasn't their taste, or just walk right by your booth and everything you spent a year creating, like you made a big banner and they didn't even look up off their phone,
Yeah,
didn't even notice it.
here's the thing, right? It's how do I put this? That's part of the deal. Everybody's got different wants. Like I think one of the hardest things to accept in life is everybody has different goals, different wants, different desires. And they're going to follow those, whatever those are. So your goal isn't to reach all of them. The goal is to find your people that love your particular flavor of ice cream, my friend. It's all about finding the people that like make this. You might accidentally make a vanilla or chocolate, something so universally awesome that people don't like. There's a debate between vanilla and chocolate. Eventually goes, who cares? It's ice cream, right? That's literally what vanilla and chocolate. Now, all the other flavors, there's some back and forth and some ups and downs,
Yeah.
but when it comes right, that's why vanilla and chocolate win. They're so universally appealing. They may not be your favorite flavor, but everybody says they're good, right?
Yeah, but, you're gonna boast about your influences, right? So if it's your favorite, you're gonna boast about that. So like,
That's
Pharaoh
it.
versus Priest. Like if you love Egyptian mythology, you like a little bit of historical context, like Pharaoh versus Priest is gonna be like your thing. And I'm kind of unapologetic with how loose I play with some of the like facts of historical Egyptology, because like
Yeah.
that's part of the commentary, because a lot of that stuff is BS, or has been just give it a little time and it will be that theory will be like canned, because um Egyptology is always going to be shrouded in mystery, because its origins are shrouded in mystery. So there's a lot of room for storytelling and embellishment, which I just really jump into.
Okay, so we'll talk about your book in a second. I'm going to have one interesting point I had, and it just made me put. You heard Egyptology, Jag? Yes, you did. Here, I'm going to put you. So I'm going to tell a really fun story here. I did a book called Storm Dancer a few years back. I had the idea. I had the idea in the story that my characters would find. Hey, Jag, how you doing? How you doing? So I had this idea that they would find a Pez dispenser in the dumps in this story. It's a post-apocalyptic thing. And the reason I wanted Pez dispenser because how do you explain how are future generations going to understand a Pez dispenser? Right? It makes no sense, right? Then I had a really, really wonderfully awesome thought. And it occurred to me something, and in Thai actually, I thought about this in Egypt in particular. A lot of the art, like we have pieces of the story. We can figure some things out just based on things like math, and some of it is probably accurate just based on those things. But some of it is a mystery. And I had this like wonderful thought, and I thought this is really cool, going back to like the kids thing for a second. What if some of these mystical Egyptian artifacts that we think are so religious are nothing more than a father or a mother buying a toy for their kid? And I
Hmm.
thought about that like that. It's like, that's probably a lot of truth to that. Because we're not that different, no matter like human nature has not changed that much in thousands of years. And it's one of those situations where I looked at it and said, yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. And so I was like, so now I look at some of these religious artifacts and I think somewhere in there is an ancient Egyptian's Pez dispenser. And I think
Hmm.
that's a pretty cool thought. I like
But
that.
that thought is so profound, and when you talk about like just what's lost in translation,
Mm-hmm.
there's people that speak the same exact language, the same dialect, regional, colloquial context, can miss speak, or not find the right words, or say the right words that just are misunderstood, and intention is not gathered the way it was thrown
Well,
out there, right?
Yeah, well, there's some things that are unique to our time. Okay, like the coolest inventions of our time, in my opinion, are Lego, the Slinky. Like Pez is just like we have these really absurd things, right? And I think about that, and it's like they had their own absurd shit. They had to have. We don't get it because it's thousands of years past our point of origin. But at the same time, no doubt it's there, right?
So, we're talking about, you're talking about, the mundane as out of context being seen as like really special. There was a scene in Land of the Lost with Will Ferrell where like they find this like lighter because and like if you take it back to like a different age, like you just and that trope has been talked shown many times, right? You're like a guy because you have mastered fire, right? So like these things that are mundane in a certain time are fantastical out of context or in a different time, even in the same like uh, somebody being exposed to an idea in the same like time, can really be profound because they just were ignorant of it.
Like okay, so one of my favorite Egyptian things that I read about is they had bifocals in ancient Egypt. They legitimately had bifocals, like glasses, like we have, reading glasses. They have it. Robert Temple's Chronicle of Legends talks about this in great detail, and it's one of those things like it's so how you can tell how sophisticated like again it's one of those like similarity things, right? Back then in the 19th century, the English were like, well, we were the ones that invented it. We discovered this wonderful thing, and it's only us. We were the smartest civilization of our time. Nothing can be further from the truth. We are just repeating. There's nothing new under the sun. All this stuff we're doing now on some level has been around before. In fact, I mean, you look at Egyptian hieroglyphics and you look at like our freaking memes on Facebook sometimes, and you look at that, it's like they're eerily similar. Like in some ways, we haven't changed at all. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but but on the flip side, right? We all create these amazing things that from like this is the other last thing I take away from that thought is we create amazing wonders in our time. All of us do that we take for granted. And because of like it makes me realize because from the outside looking in, right? I do a drawing, it's a drawing. I drew it. Cool. It's nothing special. But someone else will be like, "Oh my god, you drew this." Right? That's a real thing. We all bring gifts to the equation that we never fully value in the moment. And it's something that I recognize and that's actually what the Pez dispenser taught me. It's like we treat things with a certain level of mundanity, but also there's wonder in everything we make.
I mean, this Pez dispenser for a little kid looking through, you know, things that can, and they find it, and like how much joy does
Well,
what that it
well
was
it, fri-
intended for bring?
it frightened my kids in that story because what the hell? Like, what context? What kind of thing
Oh,
you would put like not like a head on an animal and like nothing in the middle? Like, who would do that? What kind of
just
monsters?
the symbology back to like real like intention and storytelling, and the Pez dispenser as a juxtaposition to the apocalypse,
Yeah.
right? The Pez dispenser is such a joyful
Mhm.
interaction, whereas somebody finding it out of context in a world that's has lost that seems like such a good um, item, a good
Mhm.
symbol for like the change that must have happened, right? And we're talking about symbols in Egyptology and what these symbols mean for people, and people have created whole dissertations and a whole life and called themselves experts on a certain thread of Egyptology or art history. And it's a thin line, it's a super thin veil that, like I said, you can be an Egyptologist and your whole theory just out the door as somebody sees a rain pattern that just updates your whole a dating system, right? As somebody sees a rain pattern that is irrefutable.
But that's the thing. Like we're reconstructing a story. Like we don't like. it's going to be really interesting in about 30 years because we're going to have, for the first time, we're going to have a lot of people that are growing up in a digital age where everything is recorded. Cool thing about ancient Egypt, the cool thing about ancient Egypt, the cool thing about like ancient Sumeria, ancient Greece, ancient Rome. Although we have pieces of these places, there's a lot left to the imagination. We're never going to, like, I can think Tutankhamun's an asshole. I think he was. That doesn't mean I'm right. I just have an image, right? That's it. All I got's an image. Now I have a little bit of evidence to support my image. That doesn't mean I'm right. That's just the story I'm telling. Like, we tell ourselves stories about what it was like in the past, where it was like we take our cultures, our histories, our stories, and we make them our own and we tell them, which is what you did with your comic. You sort of like, well, you know what? I don't necessarily, again, historic from just a purely historical standpoint. Okay, the common prevailing thought might not be mine. So what? I'm having fun. Shrug.
Yeah, I have that kind of fun loose and fast with Pharaoh versus Priest. I mean, I did the research, and Akhenaten is very famous or infamous pharaoh, depending on which side of the you want to go with it. Some people say he was like a Moses figure. So uh, some people say he was like a heretic. Some people say he was a pioneer in religious thought. So I just played loose and fast with all those notions. Nefertiti is the character that I base his wife on, but I call her Nefertune because I always think like Nefertiti. Like, how do we know what these pronunciations were? Right, Nefertiti in our language just sounds so informal, right? Like, that like if I met somebody or if I was a king, like, um, you know, people wouldn't call me by my first name, by my first name or my nickname. You know what I mean? That would still be only reserved for the people. So her name is Nefertune in my book because I just, they just uncovered that the bust of Nefertiti might have been a forgery.
Mm-hmm.
In all likelihood was a forgery. So just the whole concept and image of Nefertiti that people held on for so long just comes crumbling in a uncovering some information that just upends who you thought these people were.
But it's saying the farther we get away from it, the more that's gonna we're gonna become more unsure, not less, because that's just how it works. Because we don't remember, right? And so that I think that's it's the most interesting thing about human psychology is we have this fundamental ability. Huh. Oh, hold on a second. I hit the wrong sheet. She jumped on me here. So first one was that. I actually watched some YouTube videos about Egypt pronunciations, and it is quite different. Absolutely. And it would be. Different culture, different time, different era. We imagine. We don't actually know. I think that's actually one of the cool things about history, right? But that's all in the meaning of it. History, his story. It's all about story at the end of the day, right? And you can do that with anybody in history, right? Shakespeare, Marcus Aurelius, any of the popes you'd like to mention, King Henry VIII, Julius Caesar, right? Plato, Aristotle, right? I mentioned Tutankhamun, right? Solomon, right? It doesn't matter who or what who you look at. You can look at them so many different ways, and that's always fun. So
yeah, and I had a lot of fun with it. I added like this alchemy, system, and it's really like Homer's Odyssey meets like Stargate or like a old Sinbad tale where he's just trying to go take the throne, and there's assassins that are have these different levels of power trying to keep him from doing that.
So you're like old school Egyptian, like mummy kind of, like it's got
You know
kind of
what?
that
No,
vibe.
it's really more you know like there's no superpowers in this story.
You don't need superpowers to have like that feeling, like, you know.
But like there's like this spiritual, like the last boss is like this ethereal, being, like based on like Anubis. So there are these symbols that you'll, these deities that you'll recognize, but it's really like, based on like his family, and like him really just trying to take a real trip, like to the capital. And the assassins, have a high level of technology, but it's meant to be like understood, right? I think they figured out a way to build the pyramids. I don't necessarily take the jump that they were, uh, even if by a higher order, like they still figured out some mechanical way to move these blocks and
Yeah.
to build these things, right? So I figure like I tell a little bit more logically oriented story.
We try to fit that, like, and that's the last thing about like ancient cultures. They had different ways of thinking than what we have today. I mean, we are human nature is the same, but how we see things always is different. Jag will tell you I'm very unique in how I see the world, right? So, but that all said, that's what makes me me. I just see the world in a different light, and I can imagine things differently because of it, right? Just and but on the flip side, some things like I'm not pop culture cool anymore. I'm just not. So I like a funny example. A buddy of mine would quote "How I Met Your Mother" to death. I thought he was brilliant until I actually saw the show for the first time ever. I was so sad. I was absolutely so sad because I actually thought he was far more brilliant than he was. I was so I was like, "Oh my god, dude, you completely ripped the show off." Jesus, right? But,
Yeah.
um, but that's the thing, like, that's the flip side of how I think. I don't pay attention to what's cool or popular culture. I'm more worried about my own pursuits, whatever they are. That gives me a unique perspective. Cultures had different ideas of what mattered to them. Greece, Rome, today, although similar, different too. Technology, like the way we have it in this moment, I mean, everything is essentially a light bulb today, which is both good and bad. There's a certain Tower of Babelish theme we got going on here, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it has enabled me to have this conversation for over an hour with you. So there's good and
Mhm.
bad that comes with all of it, right?
Yeah, and like just I think the light bulb is again like from something that's mundane to how spectacular it can be. That same function is the basis for so many levels of technology and how it interacts and makes our lives better to its destructive power. And I think my magic system in Pharaoh versus Priest really walks the line of somebody who has breakfast with his family, right? And that's a panel, that's a story, that's a part of the story, right? It's not so superhero laden where you don't get the access to this character having coming home from for the day, and and having a conversation on the bed, in a sleepless banter with his wife, to also waking up and fighting fog giants, or taking a trip to go reclaim the throne and being sat upon by this assassin with just this incredible like modern crossbow that like just what can wipe out his whole crew except for him, who has this like type of magic staff a la like Moses. And where I
I was
said
I
Aten.
I was gonna actually ask you about that because it sounds to me like when you described like Pharaoh versus priest, it was like this almost sounds very much like Moses versus the Pharaoh, right? There was a very like there's a moment in that it's like okay, so let's so if I were to break your story down, like no magic systems, none, like what's your story actually about? If you had to break it all down.
The story is the rise and fall of the 18th dynasty. Akhenaten, um, going from not the crown prince to being named pharaoh, as his father either died or became incapacitated to do so. His brother, who was in line to throne, not being able to do so or perishing prematurely, and that responsibility landed in his shoulders, and him becoming the infamous figure that we remember thousands of years later, and his ultimate demise. So my story is the rise and fall of Pharaoh Akhenaten of the 18th dynasty, culminating with the death of King Tut.
So I got one last interesting question then. You do have a fascination with Egypt, no matter how you would think about modern tellings being accurate and inaccurate. I get it. You get into specializations, you kind of realize that the general consensus is almost always wrong. But yes, so you gotta, yeah. So there you go. You possibly have a say. We'll get to plugging the book properly in just a second, Jake. What I am interested in. So where was your fascination with this? Like, where did you kind of stumble onto this?
From the imagery, um, as I was taking my classes in art history, I took a lot of you know African studies and you know, um, black history, and even just like the real day-to-day life in your barbershops. You have these pictures of Nefertiti and Akhenaten and the sun rays coming through. It's Egypt and Egyptology is something that the black African American culture latched onto as this symbol of black excellence. Now that's you know going back to like who like Egyptians and what Egypt was as a nation throughout the millennia. Um, that's something that's a separate discourse. But that's where the fascination came from. So at your auntie's house, you'd see a bust of Nefertiti. At your grandma's house, they'd have a picture of Akhenaten. So as I went to study these things, there were already symbols that I was connected to. And as I started to really study the history and the facts of Akhenaten, to the mystery of Akhenaten, and like people thinking like he was like this religious figure or even beyond that, like beyond this world type of figure, um, to somebody who had his likeness wiped out by his own people in the coming generations, and maybe even his son being assassinated, um, to like really being the last of an age in Egyptian pharaohs with the 18th dynasty, kind of being the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of the Iron Age. Like things changed in the Mesopotamia and throughout the land, the Levant and Egypt proper, down into Kemet and more southern nations. So it was just super rich with intrigue to dive into that I can. It didn't even really need me to add,
No, but
anything to it but it was just as I dived into, I just got deeper and deeper to where I just had so much story to tell.
so one of the other, um, so I've interviewed people who've done famous people in their stories. So last question, I think I'm adding, or well, I think we have a magical interview here. I think we went from Disney Afternoon to Pez Dispenser to ancient Egypt. I think this is a great interview,
Awesome.
right? But what did you? Okay, I'm not saying that you see yourself as Akhenaten, but there's a piece of yourself you see there. So what's that piece?
Oh yeah, no, I use all of that as a context to tell a story about me and my family.
Ah, see, there
So
you
the
go.
the story is a love story. It's a family that's trying to survive as the word that the end of an age is coming, and he gets this. He's a priest. The Pharaoh versus priest is his inner turmoil. He's a priest first, and then he becomes a pharaoh, and then he's not really prepared. He was always seen as like this aloof, or so cutting edge that like he just didn't understand his people. So like, who was this? And I back to me being the nerdy football player, right? Like, yeah, sometimes I'm on the football field thinking about like anime, or sometimes I can be like, writing and figure out I got to do some hard, I got to take out the trash or something mundane, right? Like you're always balancing these things in your life, as sometimes the world just like really like crushes your context, or takes the feet from under you,
Right, the
sometimes
world.
that are outside of your control, right? How do you keep your family together as you balance who you are, who the people that have expectations of you want you to be, and the real foundation for how you're, operating.
Okay. So I got maybe one last fun question to ask. What's your favorite anime?
Naruto.
Ooh, interesting choice.
Naruto. I was with it for a long time through the terrible filler arcs, but like the the philosophy, the ninja philosophy and the levels of
Hmm.
hierarchy and power scaling to just how imaginative. Like I loved also Avatar, so it kind of had this
Avatar's
elemental.
good.
Yeah, Avatar was
Yeah.
just incredible, and I love the three part arc closure, which is what my books follow. There's going to be an end to these stories. They're not so like open ended where like somebody's going to pick up the mantle, so to speak, like you see in Marvel, like these days, where just you get who's the next Batman or Superman type of thing. Like
Yeah, Marvel and DC have their own problems with that, and that's another discussion for another day, I think.
yeah,
But
yeah. So
but
so yeah, no, that's kind of my approach, my influence over Naruto. I just love it.
so Naruto. Okay, so for me, it's Full Metal Alchemist. That's
Mhm.
mine. I prefer Brotherhood, but I do like the first show. In my head, I actually have a pitch to actually link the two shows together for the movie for like a one and done fun story. I'm probably going to pitch it someday because I think it'd be fun. But um, no, I think, good sir, we have
Thank
an
you.
interview here. What do you think?
I appreciate you, man. That was a fun conversation. I really do. I
Okay,
really do enjoy sitting down with you.
so let's do this right then. So what I need from you is the link. Where can I find your book, and where can people find you?
Uh, our link, we're pushing everybody to our website, royalhousecomics.com is our website. We have a digital platform so you can download Pharaoh versus Priests and
There you go.
Dambe,
Yeah.
which is our other story. Yep. You can read those digitally. We will be doing a Kickstarter for people that like, having prints and would like, to have a hard copy, a signed copy. We're going to do a Kickstarter for that reason mostly, but we plan on self-publishing right to our platform, as a business model. So you can buy our books right now. You can see Pharaoh versus Priest Part 1. Part 2 will be out probably later this year as we go into Comic-Con for LA. We were just at LA Comic-Con and last month. We're going to have kind of be looking at a year of just dropping titles on our digital platform, and you can see Pharaoh versus Priest, Dambe, all the other things we have coming this year.
Okay, so is there any personal place they can find you specifically if they want to find you specifically?
Yeah, Facebook, Roger Curtis. I promote a lot of my publishing content on there. Royal House Comics is really,
Okay, no, that's cool.
yeah, that's I'm trying to push that as our brand, because that's
Yeah,
what I'm doing.
I'm just doing this real quick just because hey, people want to find you. They can come
Oh
say
yeah,
hi.
perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's all I'm doing here. And Roderick, thank you very much for coming on my show. You want to do this again sometime?
Oh man, that would be awesome. Yeah. Uh, uh, Next time I come on, man, I'll tell you about the Dambe game that'll
Yeah,
definitely have been
yeah.
launched by the time
We'll
we
talk.
come on again.
We'll talk game theory next time because
Yeah.
I definitely got some stuff. I'm sure we click with.
All right.
To
Cool.
everybody watching, listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you want to support my podcast, you can do so a number of different ways. This is my latest book release, ladies and gentlemen. This is Alice 1. Alice playing croquet in the underworld against Jason of the Argonauts. It is definitely a wild little ride. And along the way, Alice and company faces gods, monsters, and maybe the most terrifying nightmares of all themselves in this little labyrinth of croquet. Beyond all that, you can support this channel here, twitch.tv/justjoshing podcast. My YouTube channel is Joshua Pantellaresco. Like, subscribe, enable notifications there. I got 2 more interviews before we wrap up for the year. Then I come back January 6th. But the last 2 are drinking draws. I'm going to be drawing with William Holland tomorrow night. And then Ruth, I gotta make sure I got her name right because I have Curtis in my head, and it's not correct, and I know it's not correct because I just talked to you for an hour and a half. That's kind of why I have it in my head. But hold on a second here. Come on. Oh, got it. I've become very popular recently, it seems. But that all said, I have 2 good draws for the remainder of the year. Definitely keep guys. Thanks everybody for listening to my podcast last night. That was kind of a cool thing to see. All right, guys. I will see you tomorrow evening and drink and drop going in Holland. Take care, guys.